Welcome to our special coverage of President Biden's visit to Houston. Of course, he's here to pay his respects to the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Hello, good evening. I'm Len Cannon.
And I'm Mia Gradney, coming to you live on KHOU.com and KHOU 11+. President Biden's motorcade closing in now on City Hall as we await his arrival. You can see streets blocked off there around City Hall in downtown Houston as we prepare for his arrival. He's had to spend some time paying his respects to Sheila Jackson Lee and honoring her as she lies in state in the City Hall rotunda.
All right, let's go to Sherman Chow. She's live outside City Hall right now. Sherman?
Yeah, we're just starting to see a little bit of movement here. A couple of police vehicles starting to move, some other vehicles coming through. The barricades had been set up quite a while ago, at least 30 minutes, but a little bit of activity now, and we did hear some sirens in the distance. You can see that the law enforcement officers standing maybe just a little bit more at attention as we anticipate the arrival of President Biden. It is quite a show of force here. We have, of course, the Houston Police Department as well as the Texas State Troopers, not to mention the City Park Rangers and, of course, the Secret Service. A lot of law enforcement represented here. You know, one of the other things I know you are familiar with is that they will put dump trucks up to sort of cordon off the area, keep it as secure as possible. They have done that on several streets as well. You can see the flashing lights and the law enforcement officers ready. I'm going to be quiet for a second. I'm going to hold up my mic to see if you can hear those sirens. Maybe a little bit tough because it's still a ways off, but we presume perhaps that may be the signal of the motorcade coming. There are a couple of dozen folks here also behind this barricade where we are standing. These are all individuals who spent the day going into Houston City Hall, paying their respects to the late Congresswoman. She is, of course, lying in state in the rotunda right now, and then they had the opportunity to do that. There's also a condolence book, which so many people signed, but now maybe 24 or so plus folks wanted another chance at history, if you will, so they have stayed behind. They are standing with the media behind the barricade, hoping to catch a glimpse of President Biden as his motorcade comes through. Of course, he landed maybe some 20 minutes ago at Ellington Airfield, and as you have noted, bringing with him an entire host of dignitaries, about 12 maybe, elected officials, local congresspeople like Al Green, Lizzie Fletcher, and others, as well as Lena Hidalgo. So we expect to see them shortly. The mayor, of course, he was here this morning opening the original ceremony with some religious leaders and then opening the doors to City Hall to let people in for the public viewing. He, like the president, was in Austin today, though, both of them for very different events, and now jetting back to Houston for this evening viewing, which will in fact be a private one. Lenamia?
Sherman, we're all so familiar with downtown Houston and especially right around City Hall. Set the scene for us where you are. So that building that we're seeing with the barricade around it, now the flashing lights passing it, that is City Hall itself. On the other side is the reflection pool. Just kind of tell us where you are and paint the picture for our viewers.
Sure. Absolutely. Right. So you're absolutely correct. What you're seeing right now is the old City Hall. This is the classic building where so many of the ceremonies are held. And it is across the street. We're going to go ahead and pan left here to what we call the new City Hall, and new is in quotes perhaps, but the annex. That's really where sort of the day-to-day work of City Hall is done, and the council members have their offices. But there's an underground tunnel as well where they can cross the street and get over here to the old City Hall. That is, of course, where the rotunda is and where the Congresswoman is lying in state. For those of you who may be familiar, you are looking at Bagby Street. So if you just go up Bagby Street a little bit, many people will be familiar with the Hobby Theater Center, which is slightly to your left, to the Wortham, the Opera Center, which is directly straight ahead. So this is a very vibrant part of downtown. The Arts Theater District, just another block really on the other side of City Hall. And to your right, it's just off camera right now, is the main library here. So yes, this is one of the beating heartbeat pulses, if you will, of downtown Houston.
All right, thank you, Sherman. This is TransStar trying to get a glimpse of the motorcade that is coming in along just entering downtown, we are told. You see the flashing lights there? There we go. Presidential motorcade slowly coming into downtown. And do we still have Charmaine? Because I had a question for her. Is Charmaine?
Yeah, I'm right here, Len. Go ahead, please.
Will there be a camera inside while the president and dignitaries go in to view the casket?
I believe so. I believe there is a pool camera. I'm not clear whether that will be feeding images live, but I believe that is correct. Sorry, I'm looking up because we have a police Fox helicopter that is now circling above us. So another sign that perhaps we are getting close.
That's right.
But yes, all day long there's certainly been a pool camera recording the folks coming and going.
Yeah, you have that protected airspace up in the air as well as on the ground too. They want to ensure that everything is safe for the President of the United States. You know, it's not very often that we see downtown Houston, and especially busy Bagby Street, looking like this, where it is totally closed down, where there is no vehicle traffic at the moment, and it's usually a good perimeter around that one specific destination, Sherman, that the President is being escorted to, that all streets are closed off and blocked off.
Yes, certainly all in name of security. You can see maybe straight ahead, photographer Sergio Soto may be able to push into you. You'll see a white tent there. That actually went up, maybe around the noon hour-ish. But that was put up, we're told, by Secret Service so that they could manage the details that they need. Our understanding is that the motorcade will come through there, deposit the president, and allow him to enter City Hall there and pay his respects along with the other dignitaries that are flying in with him on Air Force One. But that structure went up pretty quickly. I imagine they have plenty of practice. We have a few more vehicles coming through. A pickup here, flashing lights, some more. So trickling signs, if you will, more emergency vehicles beginning to come on into downtown. We are here off of McKinney, which feeds right off of the main freeway, and we see some more lights heading this way. So this is our guesstimate, our anticipation that the presidential motorcade will come in, access the freeway off of McKinney, because that is the only street that is still open and not barricaded. Here you go, you see some more.
And the president often...
HPD units, some tow trucks, just about everything you might need. Lots of just-in-case scenarios here.
Charmaine, while we wait for the president's arrival, I want to
And the folks?
want to remind people of the timeline of how we got to this point. I know that in the spring, people were calling us. They had seen Sheila Jackson Lee in public. They said she didn't look well. There were a lot of questions about her health. Then finally on June 2nd, she announced that she was battling pancreatic cancer, saying it was going to be a tough road ahead. This, by the way, was her second battle with cancer. She also had breast cancer back in 2012. And then, of course, she passed away on Friday, July the 19th. And then, of course, we had a week of organizing with both the city and the family. And here we are this week, the first day of what will be 4 days of remembrances and honoring the life and legacy of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
We have spoken throughout the course of the day, of course, to many of the folks who came by in the public viewing. And, people really felt like they knew her. They had really strong memories of having, met her at an event, at a public, place, shaking her hand. And, many people proud to pull out their cell phones and show us a picture, a selfie they have taken with the Congresswoman over the years. So there was a very familial sense, if you will, in the crowd here that gathered. Very interesting. Certainly a lot of dignitaries, political leaders, elected officials, and lots of, if you will, everyday Houstonians. And kind of interesting, too. different community centers as well as senior citizen centers, they had buses that they brought folks in, and those buses were full, but they sort of shuttled them in so that these seniors would have an opportunity to go ahead and pay their respects as well. But a very, I don't know if emotional is quite the right word. People were not tearful or unhappy. I would say they were, in fact, in good spirits. That this was, as they say, a celebration of life. Oh, here we go. Let's take a look. I think this is going to be it. We've got HPD motorcycle officers now.
And they are usually
flanking
the
both
front,
ends
right,
of the intersection here.
And they are usually the front line of that motorcade, your local law enforcement. So just as we saw last week with VP Harris.
And here we go. Yeah, okay, you're going to see it. We see them coming in off the ramp from McKinney into downtown Houston. This will be the presidential motorcade. Several limousines, several of the large SUVs, and then that white tent you saw earlier, the drape has now been pulled. We're going to presume President Biden has now entered that tent, and the Secret Service now in charge there.
So now we are waiting for the president and his contingency of several members of Congress, some familiar to us here, to go inside, and then we'll wait and see if in fact we will have a camera while the president is inside paying his respects. We may not.
It might be a matter of privacy too.
Absolutely.
And giving the president that time. Family perhaps may meet him as well. So they might want to make this a very private moment of reflection and remembrance. We have to remember that these two went way back, decades, both being such long servants of the United States government and their constituents and their people, that they've had this very long relationship and often worked together. So he might want that time just to be able to reflect and remember his sister in serving our nation, and this wonderful woman that so many came out to remember today. And it appears the president just walked right into the doors of City Hall, and Whitmire as well. And these are the doors nearest the reflection pool there at City Hall.
On the front side.
If you're familiar with the building. So the reflection pool, the president now inside the building, and we know that Congresswoman Lee's casket, the flag-draped casket, is there in the rotunda, and where people have visited all day long today. We're seeing more people make their way inside. Now, this could obviously, it looks like members of the press. So there is a traveling press corps that escorts the President of the United States. That's likely who these members of the media are that we are seeing right now, part of that presidential press corps, versus why our cameras are positioned where they are. And we're watching now video of more of those members making their way inside City Hall. So
we may get a shot, I do not know, but this is a building that, of course, many of us have been inside often for various interviews, meetings, news conferences, etc. And so here we are. There they are in the rotunda. You see the casket off to the right there. The casket was brought in, and they began public visitation here at City Hall 9 a.m. this morning, lasted for the public until 7 o'clock this evening. And now, of course, it is the president's turn, and other dignitaries who are traveling with him that will have an opportunity. And bear with us, please. This is live TV, obviously, and our cameras walking in along with the press group there and getting the shot
adjusted, so you might see some added movement there, but it's just us trying to get in place along with everything that's taking place. Often when Secret Service says now is the time to enter, you move, right? There's not a whole lot of give me just a moment. So we're going to get adjusted there with our camera shot and set up for you as we continue to watch people enter City Hall there.
Pretty good size contingency, it looks like. People going in who are perhaps on the plane, maybe some folks here in Houston who may be involved. So
we've seen Mayor Whitmire go in, and we know that he was there earlier today along with the late Congresswoman's family and Houston faith leaders who had a program outside, a brief prayer service.
Yeah, that's Congressman Al Green there going up the steps. Right now he's walking with a cane. He just went up the steps and is entering the building.
Inside there's been a steady line of people to view her flag-draped casket. We've also seen the combined honor guard there. We'll zoom out and give you the shot of the flags placed by the Houston Police Department and the Houston Fire Department as well. This is just the start, and you can see her portrait there as well inside the rotunda. This is just the start of a 4-day-long celebration of her life and her service to the community as well. The final, all of this will come to a culmination in a celebration of life service that will be held at Fallbrook Church on Thursday at 11 a.m.
And at that celebration of life, the going home celebration, if you will, Vice President Kamala Harris will give the eulogy on that day. So it's going to be a busy week of activities. We heard yesterday, if you were watching KHOU 11 News at 10 o'clock, we heard from Sheila Jackson Lee's son, who talked about his mother. And,
Jason Lee.
Yes, how proud he was of the work she had done and how much she had been a part of the community. And he was thanking people for coming out and showing their support and kind words and letters and flowers, etc. Jason Lee, by the way, is in the family business. He works in politics. He works for the mayor of Chicago, I'm told. So a little bit of his mother perhaps rubbing off. That's all he's grown up with. And so he's now in Chicago working for the mayor
she's
there.
Been such a big influence on so many people in her life. And interestingly enough, the woman who was running against her, Amanda Edwards, she was even an influence in Amanda Edwards' life in pursuing her passion
to
serve others as well, an intern. So she's left this amazing impression and legacy on so many people in the city of Houston. And that's why I think we've seen the response we have today, and with so many people showing up, and even Sherman there outside City Hall tonight, and people not even being able to get that close to City Hall, but wanting to be there and experience what's been a very full day of reflection and remembrance.
It's really astonishing when you consider the breadth of her career and how active she was. I've been doing this for a few minutes now, and I have never seen a politician who was at so many events, gave so many proclamations, who would show up, who would give speeches, who would talk to folks. I've never seen anything like it in terms of the energy it takes to make so many appearances, whether it was handing out water after a particular storm, which we have seen, or breast milk to families, or proclamations or funerals, or...
What stood out so much, Lynn? So Memorial Day weekend, she holds an annual service.
And she was there.
Every Memorial Day weekend. And she was at that service, and you could physically see that she was going through something. She had yet to make the announcement that she was battling cancer. And if you remember Memorial Day weekend, it was so extremely hot outside, and I remember her being there, and then days later hearing of the news of her cancer returning. But that really speaks to just how important it was for her to always show up.
That annual event, the memorial to celebrate veterans, she was there. She did have a walker, so you could tell she was moving slowly. Again, we had no confirmation at that point, but as you mentioned, just a few days later, June 2nd, is when she made the announcement that she was battling pancreatic cancer. And barely more than 6+ weeks later, she passed away.
You know, remembering such a dedicated and determined Congresswoman, Jackson Lee's major legislative initiatives include the Sentencing Reform Act, the George Floyd Law Enforcement Trust and Integrity Act, the RAISE Act, the Fair Chance for Youth Act,
Violence Against Women's Act.
Oh my goodness, the Kimberly Vaughn Firearms Safe Storage Act, the American Rising Act. She also sat on 3 congressional committees as a senior member of the House committees on the Judiciary, Homeland Security, and the Crucial Budget Committee. I know one of the last times that I interviewed her, it was in regard to Ukraine, and she was out of the country at the time.
She
but
visited.
Look, this is the thing, even being out of the country, making herself available to speak, and it was late here at night in Houston, so you know the time was completely different.
Middle of the night there.
We're seeing people enter the rotunda now, and we'll be watching for the president. At some point, ladies and gentlemen, we just want to let you know that we will likely stop speaking just to give this moment the respect that it is due as well. Was that her husband?
There's the president right there.
Yes, preceded by Congresswoman Lee's husband. We'll let you listen in at this point and just observe the moment.
You go back to Vance. Thank you.
So it appears that the press is being cleared at this moment. And again, this is a private moment and a tender moment to be shared between those honoring Congresswoman Lee. We saw the president engage and offer his condolences to the family. That was Dr. Elwyn Lee, and then also Congresswoman Lee and Dr. Elwyn Lee's children, Erica and Jason Lee there, that the president visited with and likely offered his condolences to before leaving flowers at her casket.
Yeah, we saw him lay a wreath right at the casket, and then the president walked up, momentarily touched the casket, stepped back, offered a prayer, did the sign of the cross, and turned and greeted the family of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee before others walked up and came and gave their condolences to the family. And we saw the woman in the white hair there, that's Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, was also there she and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee were often lockstep on a lot of issues. We saw her there standing at the casket, and
they've been together for so long, too. You have to think in city politics as well. Congresswoman Lee, before she was a congresswoman, she was also a Houston City Councilwoman as well, too. And I think that's why we've seen so much of Houston show up today. Both are elected officials and then also the everyday Houstonians as well, recognizing this amazing body of work and contributions to the community throughout the years.
She was, prior to being on Houston City Council, she was a municipal judge appointed by Kathy Whitmire, the sister-in-law of current mayor John Whitmire. So that goes way back to 1987, I believe, 1986, when she, right after she moved to Houston.
And female leaders of Houston, when you think about it, some of these founding first fierce female leaders of the city of Houston. She was appointed the first female ranking member of the Judiciary Subcommittee as well for crime and federal government surveillance, which she served as chair during the 117th Congress. You know, there's just one mention after another when it comes to her involvement in local, state, and federal politics.
She was also at one time chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus in Washington. Very well known, very well respected.
I know we have Sherman Chow is on the ground outside City Hall. We also have Matt Doherty, who has been there this evening and watching the president's movement inside the rotunda to pay his respects. Let's check in with Matt now and see what he's observed from his vantage point this evening. Good evening, Matt.
Hi, good evening, Mia. So we're standing alongside on Walker Street. Photojournalist Ryan Phillips and I were just keeping an eye on the doors. This door over here was the door that some of those dignitaries walked through just a little while ago before they went inside. I got to tell you, Mia, this is the most quiet that I've ever heard these downtown streets in my life. We come down here a lot to do live shots and everything else, and it is just like dead quiet. You can't hear any cars, no sirens, nothing. It's just us. And there's, I mean, we're lucky to get this shot. No other media is with us over here. Ryan, if you just take a look across the street to the park, you can see some of the Houston Mounted Patrol over here just keeping a watch on everything that's going on. You won't see anybody in the park. The park is completely empty. The entire theater district is empty as well. And on these streets, all you're going to see right now are law enforcement vehicles. Take a look just this way down Walker Street. You can just see how quiet everything is, and just Secret Service and law enforcement officials standing around us. You know, Ryan and I were talking when we were driving up here, kind of remembering some of our own personal Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee stories. And you may not have agreed with her politics, and she was a tough woman, but you know, she couldn't have been kinder to us. I remember the last time that we were with her, we were riding on a bus tour with her of the 5th Ward amid all the creosote and cancer cluster controversy out there. And just like you said earlier, Lynn, she was a fierce advocate for her constituents, if you could say one thing about her.
Very true, Matt, thank you. One story that I remember in particular about the Congresswoman, I emceed an event for one of the annual 9/11 celebrations, and the Congresswoman showed up. My daughter sang at that event, and the Congresswoman was so excited, she took video. And my daughter later said, when we learned of her passing, she goes, "Isn't that the woman that watched me sing?" I said, "Yes, that is." Another one of those events where she was always there. She was very encouraging to my daughter, and so I'll never forget that. Just in terms of, sometimes you go to events and you have your kid with you, and you're kind of watching through the lens of what they're experiencing.
Speaking of kids, I felt like I was a kid when I first started covering the Congresswoman.
You were.
Because when I came back to Houston, because I started in Houston behind the scenes. So I was familiar with her even then in 1997. But when I came back to Houston as a young reporter in the city, she was always so gracious to answer any of my questions. And I remember, you know, every time, these are the things people don't know. Every time I would get a promotion. I would move up from the field to the desk, from the weekend desk to the morning desk to the evening desk. She would always congratulate me. And there was a certain sense of pride. And I think that was really more, just a shared love of being dedicated to your craft, whether that was serving the people, or dedicated to your craft in serving the people through reporting and bringing them their stories of the community. And, she would call, or she would have one of her staffers call and let me know what was going on in the community. And she had no problem in letting me know why I needed to cover it and why I needed to be there. But, I always respected her for advocating so hard. And I think that was such an admirable quality of hers, and even a lesson for myself that I learned as a young journalist in covering her, that, here was the strong, determined woman who had no problem with stepping up and saying what needed to be said. And it's been quite the time in covering her for a couple of decades now. I came back to Houston in 2000, so you have to think it's been 24 years of covering her stories, those things and agenda items that she was trying to get past or got past.
She also wouldn't hesitate if she disagreed with something.
I got those calls too.
She would let you know, and it would be this polite, gentle conversation. I understand, Congresswoman. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I would always say yes, ma'am.
And we know, and I've talked to people who knew her well about this. At times, she was tough on people. She had a high turnover rate in her congressional office, and someone told me she drove the wagon hard, so to speak, and she had expectations. And they told me, when you're a leader and you have high expectations, people don't live up to the expectations, then there would be consequences. That was their explanation of how tough she could be on folks as she was sitting on Capitol Hill.
So is the case with so many successful women, right? The expectations are extremely high because they want to produce for people, and she has produced so much, so many acts of or pieces of legislation that she has passed, rather, that have made a change and a difference in people's lives, and not just here in Houston. I think that's the thing that we really have to reflect on.
Yeah, I heard members of the Congressional Black Caucus talk about how she was like she was involved with, on some level, aid or information or a connection to Pakistan. So she would be flying to these different places around the world as part of her work as a Congress member. So we know her in Houston, but she's also known around the country and around the world for other events and activities and sponsors that she was involved in.
So we might be seeing some movement sometime soon. We know at about 8:04, just 2 minutes ago, at the White House TV pool there, they had been escorted out, and we saw that taking place on camera in real time. As they departed, the lawmakers traveling with the president were paying their respects. I know we have spotted also Senators Warnock, Padilla, and Coons, and the press corps loading up in the van. So it won't be long now, likely, before we see the president make his departure from City Hall as well.
I am sure that it is a moment for the president to talk to the family, to share stories, because he and Jackson Lee go way back. He probably remembers when these kids were very little. And so an opportunity to chat with them personally without the glare of a camera, and to offer his condolences to the family, as well as we see more people coming out and some people going in. So there's some movement. We don't know how long the president is going to be inside. But once he leaves, it's a fast trip back to Ellington, and then it's wheels up back to Washington.
Yes, and it is President Biden today. Wednesday, we await the arrival of Vice President Harris. Thursday, she will take part in the celebration of life. She will help to eulogize Congresswoman Lee. I anticipate that we'll see several eulogies from different people, be it family or other elected officials and dignitaries as well. In a statement, Vice President Harris had called Congresswoman Lee a dear friend. And we know that through the Black Caucus that those two had much interaction together as well. That is where the VP said that she really got to know the Congresswoman as well.
We always talk about this, Mia. Whenever there's a big story, no matter where it is, there always invariably is a Houston connection. And so here we are today. You have Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who was, of course, well known. And just in the span of a few days, you have the visit from the vice president and a presidential nominee, and now the president is here as well. So this city always in the mix of major stories. This is just one of them.
Congresswoman Lee leaving behind quite the legacy and the celebrated legacy. And I think we're realizing, if you didn't know before, just how big that legacy is to have the President of the United States travel to her home city, her beloved hometown of Houston, and to take the time out to pay his respects, leave those flowers, touch her casket, and then in turn touch her family and interact with them during what is a difficult time, but yet you see this look of joy on people's faces. I think it's the joy because of the life that has been lived.
And it's the recognition from the rest of the country, i.e. the president shows up, members of Congress show up. Always a difficult time, I'm sure, for the family to go through this, but also having this sort of ceremonial goodbye, which represents the breadth and depth of what Sheila Jackson Lee was about when she was here. And hence you have this kind of farewell, 4 days of remembrances here in the city of Houston. This is only day one at Houston City Hall.
We saw quite the Democratic contingency this evening, of course, to greet the president, and then also there at City Hall. But we know that, of course, members from the other side of the aisle have expressed their condolences as well. Senator John Cornyn, who worked with Congresswoman Lee on making Juneteenth a federal holiday. She carried it in Congress, and then that was her partner in the Senate to make that come to fruition. So he also, upon her passing, had expressed his condolences, and so many others, again, on the other side of the aisle as well, too. That was Mayor Whitmire making his departure.
I believe so. In case you're just joining us, and we're streaming, we've been streaming right now for quite some time. We are awaiting for President Biden to leave City Hall while he's right now paying respects inside with the family of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. We saw him earlier walk up, touch the casket, speak to Elwyn Lee, Congresswoman's husband, and her 2 children. She also has 2 grandchildren, by the way. And so we're waiting for him to leave and then head back to Ellington Field. Earlier, we saw him arrive at Ellington. He came in from Austin, by the way, where he was speaking.
It's been a long day for him.
Quite a day. Speaking at the LBJ Library on the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act, which of course was signed by then President Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the last president to say he would not seek the nomination in the Democratic Party for president. That was March 1968, a lot earlier than what President Biden, when he decided to step down here, right on the doorstep, just, literally 100+ days away from the election.
And we saw also in Austin, joining the president there were several of those same dignitaries that we saw out on the tarmac and at City Hall tonight to mark that occasion and that anniversary as well. We continue to watch people trickle out of City Hall, and also continue to see that law enforcement presence downtown as well. It's very quiet in downtown Houston, other than this presidential motorcade when it takes off again, and we know Sherman Chow is standing by live outside of City Hall, so she is up close and personal with the action there. We'll, of course, be watching to see when it pulls off as well, but we know that the president likely wanted to spend some time with the family and to reflect and take in this moment and the passing and remembrance of Congresswoman Lee.
Always very quiet in downtown Houston when you have the president visit because of heightened security, I must say. And I'm sure they have blocks and blocks shut down and a security presence on each and every block for a long stretch. And then, of course, we always know that HPD has a large contingency of officers who are part of the motorcade and setting up in advance. So.
And this is the security that we know about.
That
and
we
can
know
see,
about.
Right?
Absolutely.
There's also security outside of that as well. I want to visit real quick with Sherman Chow because we keep showing the video of these white tents, and Sherman is very familiar with exactly what that setup is as she watched it go up today. Sherman, just checking back in with you. We know it's all quiet because I believe the president is still inside the rotunda inside City Hall, but tell us about this setup, this white tent, and what you're observing right there right now.
They put it up. I'm told it was the Secret Service that went ahead and put the tent up. There's two of them. It attaches directly to one of the entrances to City Hall, the McKinney side entrance, and then obviously the second tent that covers part of McKinney is to allow vehicles to enter and exit. So they pulled the drape over after we presume the presidential limousine went inside. But all of this went up in just a matter of hours. It actually went up pretty quickly, sort of by my view. But we are told that that was something that the Secret Service wanted to have staged and ready to go. So it is in use. If we pull out a little bit, you can also see the barricades have gone up here on Bagby Street. And then if we pan a little bit left, you can see the two HFD emergency ambulances, and in front of them, it's really like a little parking lot. There were several of these shuttle vans, a large bus, and also security detail. I'm going to guess that the shuttle vans carried some of the press corps as well as some of the visiting dignitaries and elected officials. It was a good crowd on Air Force One that came in from Austin. A lot of folks here left Houston today to get to Austin and then came back with the president on Air Force One. So quite the journey, a very busy day. So we have a lot of law enforcement here, everyone standing, just waiting. There have been some hints or clues that perhaps the president may be winding down. We've originally been told that he should probably be spending maybe 90 minutes or so on the ground. So that may be about time now, winding up. And of course, as you have noted, he will then head back to Ellington Airfield, hop on Air Force One, and then return to Washington, D.C. And all of this, if you will, something of a preamble, because to some degree, this is a similar thing that will happen on Wednesday when the vice president returns here to Houston. This will be her second visit within a week's time. And again, you know, it always strikes me the amount of security, manpower, and all that must be in motion when the president travels. And we are reminded of that again today as we look up and down the streets here of downtown Houston.
I know earlier, right before the president arrived, there were a few people who had gathered there along the sidewalk, and I know they were chanting his name with hopes maybe that he would wave. Are there still people gathered there street side to possibly catch a glimpse of the president?
Yeah, and we're trying to pan a little bit for you and zoom on down. This is a block away from us, but you can see a crowd of folks. These are admirers, people who have already, you know, earlier in the day paid their respect to the Congresswoman. And I would say we can't really swing the camera around to our position, but, you know, maybe a dozen or so folks here, up and down these street corners. Not huge crowds, a little bit difficult to get in here because of all the street closures and the security. So I think largely these are going to be folks who happen to have paid their respects at the end of the day, were here already, did not have to fight the traffic, negotiate some of these barricades, and so they were able to simply stay, and all of them armed with cell phones and excited just sort of to be within arm's reach almost, if you will, of the events today, of the president, and having had the opportunity to touch the casket, take a photo. Some people have done that with the casket today, and also to sign that condolence book.
We just saw Congresswoman Al Green leave the building, walk across the street. So he has left. Now we're just waiting on the president and the Lee family that will perhaps all be leaving at the same time. Should be any minute now, but we'll continue to keep an eye on it for you.
We certainly will. You know, Sherman showing us the people there street side with their phones and hoping to catch a glimpse of the president. It's not every day that the president of the United States comes to your city, but this is a special time and a special occasion in honoring the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
I'm reminded of a conversation I had with the former chief of staff for President George H.W. Bush, Jean Becker. She had been a journalist before she became chief of staff, worked for both First Lady Barbara Bush, then the president. Her father died in small town Missouri, where Jean was worked on a farm. And when her father died, the president said, "I want to go to the funeral." And Sherman's talking about the logistics of all that. Jean said, "Mr. President, thank you, but absolutely not." Because
it's just too much work.
She knew how much work it would take to get to that part of Missouri with the president at the time. And she later told me her family never forgave her for not allowing that. But that's part of the logistics that you have to think about. Obviously, Houston, one of the nation's biggest cities, a lot easier to kind of figure out, to get in, get out, et cetera.
And I think the city was anticipating that this would be a possibility because of Congresswoman Lee and all that she's done in the decades with the United States government and in her role as the Congresswoman of the 18th Congressional District as well. Again, we're just watching as people leave and make their way out of City Hall this evening, just trying to gauge when we'll see the president make his departure. Now, here's the thing. We may not see that much. We may see him come out of a door because we have this tinted area that Sherman so eloquently explained was set up by Secret Service. The tents there that you're seeing in the left-hand box, just outside of City Hall. But we'll be watching and waiting to see any movement there. And of course, when we hear those sirens again, we'll know that the President of the United States is on the move in downtown Houston and making his way back to Ellington, about 20 miles south of City Hall.
The president was in Austin prior to coming to Houston this evening. It's about 45-minute flight. Then it landed here at Ellington Field. He had been in Austin speaking for about a half hour at the anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act. There's the president as he arrived here in Houston earlier this evening.
Right at about 6:45, because we had gotten the word that it'd take about 45 minutes to make the trip from Austin, and right at 6:45, right on time, that plane landed. I want to say even before 6:45, it was taxiing down the tarmac.
Right. So this is about an hour and a half ago. This video that you're watching here, he was greeted by Mayor John Whitmire, and there were several people who were on the plane who are familiar faces to Houstonians.
We saw a lot of people interacting there on the tarmac with the president, everyone from Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo. We saw Reverend Al Sharpton with him as well.
Jim Clyburn from South Carolina, been in Congress a long time, the man with the sunglasses there and the gold tie.
I believe that's Raphael Warnock
in
as
front
well,
of him.
right in front of him.
Yes, from Georgia, yes, who won that tight, pivotal race for the Senate against Herschel Walker.
Yes, yes. How we remember and covering that as well. And again, just back to our video outside City Hall, Chris Hollins, the Houston City Controller, exiting the building as well too. Out of our camera's frame now, but we know that, oh, there we go.
There he is.
Back in frame as well too.
Walking right by the camera.
A lot of activity at City Hall today, and this is really on the tail end of the day. The president spending his time inside the rotunda at City Hall, paying his respects to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. But this has been a day-long opportunity, not just for the highest elected position in the land, elected official in the land, and other elected dignitaries, but for Houstonians as well. The day started off with a brief prayer service outside City Hall with Congresswoman Lee's family in attendance, with Mayor John Whitmire sharing a few words as well. And then after that brief prayer service, we saw inside the family joined. There was music played there as well, the presentation of the color guard too, and then the opening to the public, a receiving line that stretched outside City Hall as well, to people lining up to make their way inside the rotunda, pay their respects. There was a condolence book as well that people were able to sign.
That's John Whitmire right there, the mayor. He's walking out right now.
So it's very likely, if the mayor is exiting the building, that the president is either exited, at least gotten into the car, or is making his way out too. I can't imagine the mayor not wanting to be there during the entirety of the president's visit to Houston City Hall.
We are learning that the president signed the guest book inside. This is something that will be treasured by Sheila Jackson Lee's family forever. He signed it. She was fearless,
proud
and bold. Fearless, proud, and bold. May God bless a dear friend and great American. Seeing John Whitmire reminds me of one of Sheila Jackson Lee's rare political defeats. She lost to him in a runoff for the mayor of Houston, and then, of course, turned around and said, I'm going to go back to the 18th and run there, and won handily. So she dominated in the congressional races, no ifs, ands, buts, 60, 70% of the vote, typically every 2 years for almost 30 years. Then she decided to run for mayor, got to the runoff, and lost to John Whitmire, two Democratic stalwarts, I must say, in Houston. And then, of course, she returned to familiar ground, back to Congress, ran, won, and kept on going.
Well, she had hoped to fill her very good friend and a longtime brother, she would call Sylvester Turner's seat in the role of Houston City Mayor. And we know that Mayor Turner and her had a very, very close relationship, decades-long relationship, and shared a lot of the same common views and advocated for the same. So naturally, it made sense for her to want to pursue that seat. But I do think, like you said, the very rare defeat by her, quite frankly, the only one that I can think of during her
Sylvester Turner told me
office.
that he met Sheila Jackson Lee in 1987 when she first moved to Houston. They both were lawyers at the major law firm Fulbright and Jaworski. That was before she was nominated to be a municipal judge. So yes, they have a long history. They go way back. She supported Mayor Turner in his race for mayor, or races, because he ran 3 times before winning. And then, of course, he supported her when she ran against John Whitmire.
Speaking of support, a Harris County judge, Alina Hidalgo, greatly supported Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and just the same, the opposite in that relationship received. And we saw her at Ellington Field as well today, receiving President Biden, and likely a part of this contingency that traveled to Houston City Hall tonight, along with the president as well. We saw quite the convoy, and within that convoy, you had the president's staff, you had the press corps, and then these dignitaries. We know the least of dignitaries, at least a dozen elected officials that traveled not just to Houston City Hall, but traveled from Austin in that celebration today at the LBJ Library to the city of Houston and to the Rotunda.
If you're just joining us, our live streaming coverage, all is quiet right now. President Biden inside City Hall paying his respects to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Sheila Jackson Lee's husband, her children are also inside, and other dignitaries. He landed on Air Force One coming from Austin about an hour and 45 minutes ago before arriving here downtown. Sheila Jackson Lee's casket has been lying in state at City Hall since 9 o'clock this morning. The public had its opportunity until 7 o'clock this evening. Now it's the president and other dignitaries' turn to do so. Tomorrow there will be another event, and then of course Wednesday and Thursday.
So just going through the schedule of events over the next coming days, because this is a 4-day long celebration of her life. So today, of course, we had her lying in state and the public able to pay their respects. Tomorrow, there will be a viewing and remembrance that will take place at God's Grace Community Church. That's up on West Montgomery Road. That's going to be from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Wednesday, another viewing and service, this time at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. That'll be from 11 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that will be followed by a community farewell and appreciation service from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. And note here, so much of this is including the community, and I can imagine that's the way the Congresswoman would have wanted it to be. And then, of course, on Thursday, the final celebration of life service that will take place at Fallbrook Church at 11 o'clock in the morning there. And that service will be rather robust, I can imagine, with several people eulogizing her. Among them, Vice President Kamala Harris. She's going to return on Wednesday, we're told. Thursday, she'll be speaking at that celebration of life service as well.
Let's take you inside. This is the moment President Biden walked into the rotunda, touched Sheila Jackson Lee's casket after laying a wreath you see there. And later he would sign the book inside. And of course, this is something the family will love. We'll repeat it because we said it minutes ago. He signed the guest book, and it says, "Fearless, proud and bold, may God bless a dear friend and great American. May God bless you, Sheila Jackson Lee."
Such a lovely sentiment, what he wrote in the book, and then of course his time spent there in the rotunda as well, praying, touching the casket, and then these 3 people that you're seeing him visit with here, these are Sheila Jackson Lee's family members, her beloved loved ones, her husband, Dr. Elwyn Lee, her daughter Erica, and her son Jason. Were all there to receive those condolences from the president. One must wonder now if that's who he is meeting with at the moment, because we've seen several people leave. We've seen the mayor exit the building. We've seen Congressman Green exit the building, Sylvia Garcia exit the building. So perhaps the president is inside spending a little bit more time with the family now. We saw that brief moment inside the rotunda and him there visiting with them.
Several members of Congress traveled with him from Austin, and others well known. And so I don't know how many of those folks will be going back to Washington with the president when he takes off. Al Green has already left, so it doesn't look like he will. Sylvia Garcia, don't know. Lizzie Fletcher, perhaps. So who's to say? But if they want to hitch a ride on Air Force One, this will be the opportunity to get back to Washington. And we're just waiting on the president to wrap up here at City Hall before he heads back to Ellington Field.
And we've watched, quite this procession down to City Hall earlier this evening, and it will likely be the same on the way out. So we have seen the trip to City Hall expedited rather quickly, that is. And the same will be for the exit from City Hall as well, too.
And also, Mia, I got a text from someone who wanted us to know that Thursday's service that you mentioned earlier is not open to the public. Just to be clear, it is by invitation only. or registration. But it is not open to the public. It would probably not be able to handle all the people.
Well, that, and we have to keep in mind, so there's going to be the highest level of security. Again, the vice president is going to be at Thursday's service, and there are plenty of other opportunities, as I mentioned, in going over the agenda and day's events this week that were open to the public. Just want to reiterate, on Wednesday, there is going to be a community farewell and appreciation service. That's from 3 o'clock in the afternoon
Is that Wheeler,
until 8 o'clock.
Is that Wheeler Avenue?
That is at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. So again, there are opportunities for the public here.
There.
We had
And that's going to be
today,
several hours, as I understand it, like 3 to 8.
3 to 8 p.m. And then, of course, today we had the day-long celebration. We saw quite the turnout today, but we know how this is. You know, people see this opportunity and realize, you know what, maybe I need to pay my respects, and how can I do that? So Wednesday would be the public's other opportunity to do so at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church at that community farewell and appreciation service.
So here in Houston, we've lost a couple of giants here as of late. When you mentioned Wheeler Avenue, of course, the Reverend Lawson passed away not too long ago. We covered that story. It was a huge turnout at Wheeler. He's the founder of that church, coming from St. Louis in the 1950s to Houston. And now Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, also not a native, a New Yorker, Queens, New York.
You wouldn't know it.
But came and made her mark here in Houston,
she certainly
as so many
feels
people
like
have.
it certainly feels like a native. She's been here so long,
yes.
Right? She is a Houstonian. And all of this just really happening in the past couple of months. I know the night that we found out about her passing, July 19th, was right before we went on
It
for
was.
the 10 o'clock newscast.
It was a bit of a surprise, and because we had no clue. We had no indication that
she was
her health was
as such.
declining, and so yes, it was a bit of a shock.
It certainly was, and that she passed on the 19th. That was 2 months after announcing that she'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So how quickly that all transpired, and we know she's a fighter. So the cancer, as we know it, can be extremely aggressive, and that time span from diagnosis until the end, sadly, can often be quicker than we realize. But tonight, I know that her family is likely consoled by
President's visit, yeah.
The president's visit, the show of love and respect as well today from the city of Houston.
You know, because we're here every day and reporting all the time, we're kind of used to seeing the Congresswoman. We got used to it. She's always showing up. So
Always.
you almost take her presence for granted.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so funny, you know, it's like I didn't even need the organizer of an event that we were at to tell us, like, okay, Congresswoman Lee is here. She's going to want to come up and say, as soon as I would see her walk in the building, she wouldn't be on the schedule or the agenda. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to make a room here and we'll work her in here. And she knew I knew the drill, and you knew the drill as well.
And she was often seen, as we look at some of the motorcycles from the motorcade starting to show up, perhaps an indication the president will be leaving shortly. But anytime there was a presidential speech at the Capitol, you would always see Sheila Jackson Lee in the front, shaking the hand of the president.
Yes.
Always.
Yes. Front and center. But you know what? That's how you get things done too, right? By showing up, by being seen. And this wasn't a woman who wasn't just necessarily looking for the cameras. I mean, when you put the mic to her, she had something to say. There was always a deliberate message there, and a message with purpose and intent. And I think for her constituents, that's why she got reelected time and time again, because they could constantly always see her at work.
I remember covering it it was a mayoral, not a debate, but a gathering of the mayoral candidates. And it was at the Buffalo Soldiers Museum. This would have been last October. And Congresswoman Lee was there, not feeling well back then. She had a bit of a cold, but it didn't stop her from speaking out about whatever question. What I did, I presented questions that people in the audience had for the mayoral candidates. And she was, would take a sip of water and gather herself, and then boom, she'd have an answer. So she was always committed to showing up and being where she was asked to be, for whatever commitment, for whatever it took in terms of whether it's a campaign event, etc.
In thinking about and reflecting on all that she's done, and we've reported in great detail in our Juneteenth documentary specials about making Juneteenth a federal holiday, and she was at the forefront of that. She's the one who saw that to fruition. She worked it up in the House. Senator John Cornyn, she brought him on board to help get it passed in the Senate. But there was so much that she did in that community, and so much for the history, the Emancipation Trail. That also was a huge initiative of hers. But more recently, I thought about the dollar amount because she was there with a printed check, but she announced a $4.1 million HUD grant awarded to the city of Houston for the adaptive reuse of the Wesley AME Church to be repurposed and become a community hub in historic Third Ward. Part of what's to be called Gospel Square.
Yeah, that got our attention, sort of like we were in the final stages of putting our documentary together for Juneteenth, A Legacy of Song, it was called. So it was all about music, and all of a sudden, Sheila Jackson Lee is talking about, hey, here's this money, and here's going to be a gospel museum. Gospel, of course, was a major part of the documentary. So we were quite excited. I said, we need to send a camera.
And that church at one point was at risk for being demolished.
Yes.
And just trying to find a purpose for this piece of history to remain in the community, and her making that a priority and finding those funds and allocating those funds. And that's what she was able to do, was to get funds allocated to the community, to serve the community, to preserve the community as well.
Yeah, the sun has now set, of course. The president has been downtown, I guess since about, 7:40 maybe, somewhere around there, and been inside ever since. So it's been about an hour, and meeting with the family of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. We're waiting for the president to walk out, and then of course he will be on his way. Day one of the celebration of life for the Congresswoman.
4 full days, multiple opportunities there for the public to take part in honoring and remembering the late Congresswoman as well. We know we have the celebration at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church that's coming up this week on Wednesday. Thursday will be that private celebration of life service where Kamala Harris will also take part in eulogizing the Congresswoman. Often with a dignitary or a person who has achieved so much in a lifetime, they are memorialized and eulogized by multiple people. So I'm sure as the week passes, we'll learn more about those who are expected to speak and take part in that final service, that celebration of life as well. We just continue to watch here for the presidential motorcade to be on the move again and return to Ellington Field this evening, where we watched Air Force One land earlier at about 6:45, almost 2 hours ago now, as we continue to watch the clock at this late hour. They will return there, where they also received the president. That interaction was pretty quick that we saw earlier when the president first
just a few
arrived.
Minutes.
Yes, when he arrived at Ellington Field. It was just a few minutes. Boy, but a lot of people got in front of him in just a matter of minutes in greeting and visiting with him as well.
It has been an event-packed day for the president, spending earlier in Austin at the LBJ Library, and speaking there, and then coming to Houston, of course. Looks like we've got some movement here. People starting to leave. Hard to tell exactly who's going to what. You can't see the motorcade. You see the SUVs, but it's hard to see. I think the motorcade is probably going to be closer on the other side of these vehicles.
Oh, definitely.
Out of the line of sight, so to speak.
Exactly. On the inside and inside the draped tent, but you can see
officers getting inside the vehicles. Maybe that is a sign the president may be coming out shortly as they prepare to head back to Ellington and Air Force One.
They're not going to be too far from the president. The president spending some time with the family inside the rotunda, also there at the casket, praying over the casket, leaving the flowers and touching the casket. We know the day after Congresswoman Lee's death that the president released an official statement on the passing of Congresswoman Lee. He wrote that Sheila Jackson Lee was a great American and said, quote, "I had the honor of working with her during her nearly 30 years in Congress. No matter the issue, from delivering racial justice to building an economy for working people, she was unrelenting in her leadership. Always fearless," and that's a word so many have used to describe her. "Always fearless," the president said. She spoke truth to power and represented the power of the people of her district in Houston with dignity and grace. Those character traits established her as a towering figure in our politics. We saw it through her efforts to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, make Juneteenth a federal holiday, reintroduce the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, and so much more. The president also said her character revealed itself time and again, including in her battle against cancer. Her brilliant spirit was unbreakable. Sheila Jackson Lee is a part of a long line of patriots who delivered the promise of America to all Americans. Jill and I send our love and condolences to her family, her constituents, and beloved colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus. May God bless our friend, Sheila Jackson Lee.
And so our producer is telling us that you can see an entrance from the white tent. Another sign, perhaps, that the president is about to exit and get in the motorcade, aka the Beast, as Mia pointed out. That's what they call it.
The presidential limousine.
The presidential limousine, and see a lot of flashing lights and people starting to get set up. Obviously, there's communication going on when the president's coming out exactly, and so we may be getting close here as we start to see some movement.
And it is quite the motorcade. So what we will see is a line of HPD vehicles, likely. Usually your motorcycle part of the motorcade is
so
your
this,
local law enforcement.
These are the one of those is a presidential limo. So you see 1, 2, and I'm not sure if there's a third, but the president is
with
probably
the flags, yes.
Yeah,
with
he's
the
on the
small
move.
Flags on the car. So.
President Biden is in the motorcade. He's in the limo, on the move back to Ellington Field. As we mentioned, he'll head back to Ellington and Air Force One. Then he will return to the White House. And a reminder, coming up on KHOU 11 News at 10 o'clock tonight, we will hear from members of the Congressional Black Caucus honoring Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and a powerful, emotional conversation that Sylvester Turner shares that he had with Congresswoman Lee just days before she passed away. That's coming up tonight at 10 o'clock.
We've had a lot of special coverage today, and that special coverage will likely continue in the coming days as well. Of course, tonight's coverage warranted with the President of the United States coming into Houston, into downtown Houston, and visiting City Hall and the Rotunda to pay his respects, his final respects and condolences to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and her family.
Watching the motorcade come right at us here. There we go. And they'll be getting on the Gulf Freeway and heading back to the airfield.
20-mile visit, or drive rather, down to Ellington Field rather quickly, though, because there is a presidential motorcade and all the roads have been closed. That pretty much wraps up our coverage of this special event and the president's visit to the city of Houston. We'll have a full additional wrap-up and summary of what took place this evening. That's coming up on KHOU 11 News at 10.
For now, we say goodbye. Thank you for joining us.